The Earth is very old. Scientists think that it is almost 5 billion years old. And during all of this time, the agents of erosion have been working to tear down the land. Grain by grain, the rock in this Colorado canyon breaks off and falls to the floor below. Or it may be carried by the wind and later deposited as a small sand dune. But eventually running water will pick up these sand grains and carry them to another place. The water may carry the grains a few feet or many thousands of miles. Year after year, running water helps to carry enormous amounts of debris as well as dissolved materials. When the water stops moving, the material settles out to form various sedimentary rocks. Except for a very small amount of new water, which comes to the surface of the earth from various volcanic eruptions, all water has 3 basic forms. It can be found as ice, such as these glaciers, or as a liquid, such as salt or fresh water in the oceans and lakes, and as a gas, namely water vapor and clouds. Water follows a hydrologic cycle. High above the ocean, the sun beats on the surface molecules of water. They evaporate and collect as water vapor in the air. When the air becomes saturated with great quantities of water, clouds form. Eventually, the gases form into water droplets. The cloud becomes so saturated that the moisture falls to the earth as rain, snow, or hail, depending on the temperature of the air and other variables. Most of the water which falls is evaporated into the atmosphere once again. Some water is absorbed by plants and animals, and some sinks below the surface and is trapped as groundwater. A tremendous amount of water is stored as ice. Glaciers, huge flowing masses of ice, occupy the Arctic and Greenland. On land, the ice flows into oceans, where they may move in currents as icebergs. The rain collects in channels and eventually finds its way into larger and larger channels, which find their way to the sea. The runoff water is what we shall investigate in this program. If you have ever watched the sea, you have probably noticed that it is a very strong agent of geologic change. The relentless waves upon the rocks gradually breaks apart the rocks, grain by grain. But where do waves originate, and how do they come to be? Waves are produced by the friction of the wind on the open water. The wind can travel over open water for hundreds, even thousands of miles, and this friction keeps producing the waves. The combined action of wind, gravity, and water move more material than man has ever dreamed, with even his largest and most powerful machines. Running water is perhaps one of the fastest agents of erosion. Perhaps you can remember a raging stream after a heavy rain, such as this one in Iowa. It is often muddy because it carries with it huge quantities of soil, which was carried into the river by smaller streams. Running water can cut through even the hardest rock if given enough time. Small bits of rock carried in the water help to carve away the rock beneath it. But once the river has reached the bedrock, the process slows down. Gravity pulls down water to the lowest level possible. Most rivers are above sea level, and so they flow down to the sea. Some rivers flow more quickly than others because they are higher and move to sea level in a much shorter distance. Running water carries with it a quantity of sand and sediments which grinds away the land as it passes over it. The suspended material comes from sand, silt, and clay, as well as other chemicals which have entered the water. In mountainous areas, runoff water from glaciers may contain fine white sediment known as glacial milk. And if a small sample of this water were dried, a fine powder could be found. This material is a clay-like substance, and it is found to be ground granite. In the spring, when meltwater is extremely high, great amounts of hard material are worn down and carried away.
Each year, billions of tons of soil are lost in the United States through soil erosion. Erosion reduces soil productivity and deteriorates the quality of our soil and water. The resulting sediment causes stream pollution and reduces the capacity of our reservoirs. Erosion removes the topsoil first, eventually exposing the less productive subsoil beneath. In the most severe cases, eroded land may no longer be productive and must be abandoned. Soil erosion is a gradual process that is caused by two forces of nature, water and wind. Water erosion begins with the force of each individual raindrop. Raindrops may seem insignificant, but they strike the ground with amazing force. Rain can pound the ground at speeds of up to 30 miles an hour. An intense storm on bare soil can loosen and detach up to 100 tons of soil per acre. Wind erosion occurs as the wind picks up and moves small particles of soil. As wind speeds increase, the amount of soil picked up on a bare field may easily double or even triple. For instance, if a 20-mile-per-hour wind increases to 30 miles per hour, the rate of erosion triples. There are three distinct types of wind erosion: creep, saltation, and suspension. Laboratory studies have shown that more than half of all soil eroded by wind is moved by saltation, with the remainder about equally divided between suspension and surface creep. Wind erosion typically begins at ground level as the wind causes soil particles to roll or creep over the ground. Particles roll or slide in almost continuous contact with the soil surface. Creep erosion is an extremely slow process and difficult to see without a lot of time and measurements. Wind moving soil particles in a hopping or bouncing fashion is called saltation. With each bounce, the grains typically reach heights of less than 2 inches above the surface and move horizontally about 2 to 4 inches. The impact of the particles falling back to earth dislodges additional soil that is sent in the downwind direction. Wind erosion is most visible during the suspension stage, when soil is actually moving through the air. This is seen most dramatically during a dust storm. Soil particles suspended in the air can move hundreds or even thousands of miles before they are deposited. Water and wind erosion are naturally occurring processes that have been accelerated by many human activities, such as farming, construction, and other soil disturbance activities. Everyone should be aware of the potential damage that wind and water can inflict on their land and explore necessary measures to reduce their harmful effects.